colorblind. Liberty doesn't care what you look like. Liberty doesn't care whether you've got ponytail, whether you got an earring. Liberty doesn't care what side of the tracks you're from. Liberty doesn't care whether you're rich or poor. Liberty is truly for everyone. Now, there have been times in our past that it hasn't been so. We've made mistakes as a country. We made mistakes from the very beginning. A huge mistake, an unforgivable mistake was slavery. Went on, we made mistakes in World War II. We incarcerated people without a trial. We put the Japanese in camps. Huge mistakes. We're still making some of those mistakes now. But the message of the Republican Party is that we care about you as an individual, and that no individual should ever be incarcerated without a trial or without due process.
Amen.
Now people say, oh, this is America. That never happens. Everybody gets a trial, right? We passed a law 2 years ago that says that an American citizen can be detained forever without a trial. We passed a law that says that you as an American citizen could be sent to Guantanamo Bay without a trial. Now, why is a trial important? People say, well, these are just bad people. I had this debate with another Republican senator on the floor, and he said, well, yes, if they're dangerous. And I said, well, sort of begs the question, who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not?
Yeah, a jury.
Anybody here remember Richard Jewell? Richard Jewell was the guy they said he was the bomber. He was the Atlanta bomber. He was convicted by the news media, and they said, off with his head. If he'd have been a black man in 1910 in the South, what do you think would have happened to him? So I think whether you're a minority because of the color of your skin, or you're a minority because of the shade of your ideology, you should damn well want a lawyer when you're accused of a crime. Mm-hmm. People say, well, that's gone. We don't do that anymore. We don't put people in jail because of the color of the skin. The hell we don't. 2 out of 3 people in jail are black or brown, even though if you look at drug use, it's even between whites and blacks and brown. Drug use is equal. Why is everybody in prison black or brown? Because they don't have as much money and they don't have as good of an attorney. They don't go to the rich side of Detroit to find people smoking marijuana, but they come to the poor side of Detroit. So the thing is criminal justice is not colorblind. I don't think it's intentionally set up to lock up people that are African Americans or Latinos. But the result is that. The result is that we have had a disproportionate incarceration of people of color. I'm not the only one that said this. This is something that has to change, and it needs to be part of the Republican message. In my state, it's worse. You can make a youthful mistake. And don't get me wrong, I think it is a mistake to use drugs. Alcohol, otherwise, any of these things you can abuse, I don't think it's good for you. So I'm not encouraging that it's a good thing. But what I am saying is that if you were to go to jail for this, somehow shouldn't you be forgiven when you leave jail? In my state, you never get your voting rights back. There's been a lot of discussion about voting rights. The number one cause of people losing their voting rights is not because you don't have a driver's license. It's because you have a felony record and you can't vote. In my state, it never comes back. I have a friend whose brother, 30 years ago, grew marijuana plants in his apartment in college. He still can't vote. And every time he wants to get a job, he's got to check off a box that says he's a convicted felon. I think we should take these things and make them misdemeanors.
Yeah.
It's still not saying it's right, but what it would be doing is it would get rid of the incarceration, hopefully. It would get rid of the stigma. It would get rid of the problem with voting, and ultimately the problem with employment. Here's the thing. You make a youthful mistake. You go to jail for buying, selling, or using marijuana or some drug. You go to jail, you get out. What are your prospects? Minimum wage if you're lucky. Now, what if you happen to have a couple of kids? Well, like a lot of people have, a couple of kids and they have to pay child support because they're divorced. What if you're in jail and you have $3,000 you owe after being in jail for 5 years? What do you think the odds of ever getting $3,000 are? After 5 years in prison, you're going to pay $9 an hour when you get out of jail. You're never going to pay it back. In my state, what happens? Every state's not the same, but in my state, you go back to prison. So you grow up in poverty, you get involved with drugs, you go to prison, your child support builds up, and then you're back in prison because you can't pay your child support. What I'm saying is you haven't heard many Republicans talking about this. Nope. I think if Republicans were to talk about criminal justice, making it equal and the same, having equal protection under the law for everyone, now some people say, oh, well, you know, people in poor areas of town, they don't care about taxes and regulations, so you guys need to change your policy on taxes and regulation. And I say, I don't think that's true. I think it is true if you're poor, you don't care so much about taxes and regulation. But the thing is that if we lower taxes for all of Detroit, there'll be more jobs. I'm going to be introducing at the Detroit Economic Club in about an hour a plan that would leave $1 billion with a B. $1 billion, more than $1 billion will be left in Detroit's economy if they would reduce taxes, send less money from Detroit, from everybody, send less money to Washington, and leave more in your community.
Yeah.
We just came from the Republican office that we're opening over in the northwest section of town. And guy next door has a restaurant. He comes over, he's a young African-American man, and he comes over and he says, what about tax breaks for small businesses? That's how we fix this. You're not going to fix this by going to Houston and saying, Houston, bail out Detroit. Why? It's not just the money and the fact that Houston may not be too happy about sending you the money. It's that if you send Houston's money to me and then I send it to Detroit, who am I going to give it to? Politicians in general give it to their friends. So give me a big, and this is rhetorical, I'm not saying this literally, give me a big contribution and then you get some money. That's what happens in politics. It's cronyism. It doesn't go to the guy who really is the best, the man or woman who can start a business. It goes to a politician who then says, well, John Smith would make a good restaurant owner. I'll give him $50,000, $100,000 to start a business. Well, 9 out of 10 businesses fail. So if government makes the choices, they end up giving it to the wrong people 9 out of 10 times. How do you give it to the right person? Everybody should vote. You want to have the best and greatest and most inclusive democracy in the world? It's capitalism.
Yeah.
Every one of you vote every day. You vote every day on who's going to succeed. You either go to Walmart, you go to Minute Mart, you go to a convenience store, you go to Kmart, you go to Kroger. You vote every day. The ones who succeed are the ones who the customers like. So the customer is king. So what I'm asking and what I'm promoting is something called economic freedom zones, where we give money back to those who are working and those who have businesses. I won't choose the businesses, just every business. It's every individual. Everyone who's working would have more of their money left over. $1.3 billion. I think if we bring that message to Detroit, a city where Republicans have probably been getting less than 10% of the vote, I think our vote potential is only upwards. But I also think it's the right thing to do. I do it, I'm a partisan, I want votes. I've come to Detroit asking for more votes for Republicans. Yes, I'm honest about that. But I also want something that I think will work for Detroit. If we just tax some other state and send you a big bunch of money, it'll be squandered and lost or stolen. Yes. You need to give it to the people who will work and will create a job, like the guy I met next to the Republican office over there. He's got a small business. We're talking about reducing the income tax to 5%, reducing the corporate tax to 5%. We're talking about reducing capital gains tax to 0, and you're like, what the hell is capital gains tax? That's rich people pay that. Well, yeah, rich people have money, and you want them to invest in your businesses. So if rich people will come back into Detroit, and some are, You've seen what Quicken Loans is doing. You've seen Marathon Oil. There are companies that will and are investing in Detroit. Let's make it even easier for them. Let's encourage a new Quicken Loans to come to Detroit. Thousands and thousands of jobs. But you know what we have to get over? What we have to get over as a society is the president plays this sort of thing of envy, and he says to us, oh, you should not like the rich people. We should punish rich people. I say, no, reward them. They create the jobs. That's who we work for. Anybody here work for a poor person? So you want rich people to have more money so you can have more money. It's sort of like the idea of, think of it this way. I've got 3 cars and they're all over 10 years old, okay? I work for the government now. But I don't envy one of my neighbors who buys a Mercedes because maybe my son works for the Mercedes dealer. Maybe I can't afford, I don't have a Mercedes. Maybe you can't have a Mercedes. But don't be against the rich guy who has a Mercedes because he may buy it from your son or daughter who sells the Mercedes. We're all interconnected. We have to figure we're all in this together. It's not me against you or you against the rich people or us, the middle class, against the poor people. It's everybody all in the same boat trying to float the same boat. With economic freedom zones, we're also going to reduce the payroll tax, though. Some people don't pay any income tax. So to help everybody, we're going to, if you only pay payroll tax, we're going to reduce your tax by 2%. And your employer's payroll tax by 2%. That'll help everybody in Detroit. We're going to reduce the red tape. You know that Detroit spends $20 million a year on stormwater drainage. You're like, well, don't we need to do that? Well, we didn't do it before 10 years ago. We always had drains where the water drained off, but the government's now mandated that you have to come in and spend all of this extra money on stormwater drainage. So I come from a small town in Kentucky, and I'm in the Lions Club, and I ask a guy in Lions Club, he's in charge of stormwater drainage. I say, what does that mean? My town's gonna have to spend $3 million on it. And he says, well, half of that is to print up brochures telling you what we're gonna do.
Oh, jeez. What?
Government is so wasteful. I'm not saying I'm for pollution. I'm not for pollution. You should not be allowed to dump any sewage or pollution into the Detroit River. However, we've gone so far beyond that that your government can't turn the lights on. Your street lights can't be turned on because you're sending this money and spending it on ridiculous things that the federal government's making you do you shouldn't have to do. So our message, my part of that message from the Republican Party is economic empowerment. Let's get jobs again. Let's do it by reducing taxes, not by a government stimulus, but by a private stimulus where we leave more of your money in your own hands. Let's improve the schools. Let's have competition. Everybody gets a choice. There is money right now that's directed towards impoverished areas and towards schools. The money goes to the school. Let's give the money to the kids. Let's let the kids decide what they want to do. I think if you take this entire message, economic empowerment, improving education, and criminal justice, and we make that part of the Republican message, we don't have to change what we're for. We still are the party of low taxes. We're the party of less regulation. We're the party of the Constitution. But we're the party of the individual that protects every individual regardless of wealth, regardless of caste, regardless of the color of your skin. We are that party. And I think when we are, we'll succeed in that. Thank you very much.